Hello, I'm Jeff Robertson, Sales Manager over here at your friends at Penton Audio USA, and this is a short presentation on how you can add UL2572 listed emergency paging and alert features to your existing legacy school intercom system. This presentation is from Penton Audio, and if you have any questions and or if you want to get some additional information such as data sheets, brochures, catalogs, please feel free to visit us at penton-usa.com. All right, let's get started. Now, what is the main issue at hand? Well, if you're watching this presentation, chances are you're a dealer that does a lot of work with school intercom and paging systems, or you're a school district or school facility. Well, most schools have an existing intercom that handles all their paging and bell systems already. But how can a school district such as yourself or a dealer utilize these legacy school intercom systems to easily and very cost effectively take these existing legacy intercom systems and add or provide UL listed emergency alert, paging, and messaging throughout your facility and even a step further district wide? Well, it's fairly easy to do. But before we get too far down the road, let's take a look at what UL2572 listed equipment means and what are the basic requirements. Well, UL2572 in a nutshell is just the life safety or voice evac listing requirements for any piece of equipment. Quite frankly, the UL2572 is just a listing requirement that any equipment used for the purpose of public address / voice alert and or emergency notification, mass notification purposes must follow, and it must have certain features to be able to obtain this very coveted UL2572 listing. Parts of these are, and these are just the highlights, not all the listing requirements obviously, but they have to be able to supervise the speaker circuits. That means the speakers and the wiring. They have to supervise all the amplifiers used in the system, and you have to have backup amplification capabilities as well as supervise those secondary backup amplifiers. Any paging and or messaging stations connected to the system must be fully supervised by the system, and that must be able to handle backup power, whether it's direct with battery chargers and power supplies on the system, and or sometimes you can get away with just putting on backup generators or emergency power with the facility. Healthcares do that a lot. It also has to have some sort of audio messaging capability with message storage and transmission means in there, and usually there's also scheduled events as a part of that. And the systems that have this listing also must have a way to store an event history log, which logs all the activities and events and faults in the system, gives it a time and date stamp, and these logs cannot be able to be erased or edited. They must be hard logs, and just like a fire alarm or security system would be. So that's what UL2572 listing means. So now let's go back to legacy intercom systems. If you're in a school district somewhere in the North American continent, you can bet that you probably have one or more legacy intercom systems ranging from, year or a few years old to even decades, 40, 50, 60 years old. Chances are they're going to be one of these brand names that you see here. These are some of the big players that have been around for many, many years in the school intercom market. The good news is the solution that we're going to describe here in this presentation will work with any or all of these manufacturers in some way, shape, or form. Now, let's take a look at what a legacy intercom system that you may have right there in your school or facility would look like and how it's structured. First of all, you probably have a centralized head-end. Some of the older systems, it's probably a big, huge 6 or 7 foot tall rack of equipment sitting in the office space or the admin section somewhere, or sometimes it may be back in a closet or a copy room or even an electrical room somewhere. Some newer systems, when I say newer, I'm going back probably as late as 8 or 10 or 15 years ago. These intercom manufacturers started coming out what we call hybrid systems, which had nodes. So now instead of one big, huge rack at a head end, or maybe there still is a rack and a head end, but they also have nodes, so it's distributed equipment out through the facility and data closets, IDFs, MDFs, or electrical rooms. to where these are connected either with their own cabling or it might even be connected via the TCP/IP LAN network. These are very popular for many, many years because it really cut down on the amount of wiring and labor to wire all those speaker circuits all the way back to a central point, especially in campus-style schools. That really saved a lot of money and time and effort and expense for labor. All these speaker circuits that used on these systems are usually 25-volt audio circuits. I would dare say 95 to 99% of the systems that are still out there are all using 25-volt audio circuits. Even the ones today that are IP hybrid-based are using 25-volt audio circuits. There are very few out there that don't use 25-volt systems. If it's using two-way intercommunications, typically this is to the classroom, and it can almost guarantee it's going to be 25-volt. There may be systems in your district or scattered throughout North America that do not use two-way intercom. They actually use the phones for that purpose in the classroom, and then they may only have a one-way paging, multi-zone paging, bells, and message system or announcement system. So those may be 70 volts. But for the lion's share, if you got an intercom system, it's going to be 25 volts. And they have two-way communications. And they have two-way communications to the classroom. And common areas, which are like your corridors, exterior horns, bus loading zone for your elementary schools, lobbies, admin areas, cafeterias, gymnasium, auditoriums. These spaces are what we call common areas. Typically, these will actually almost always, these are one-way paging and announcement and bell zones. They are never used or shouldn't be used for two-way intercommunications because, number one, they have multiple speakers in the zones. And number two, there's usually a ton of people and you don't know who you're addressing or who's talking back to you like you would when you dial a classroom or a specific station like a call station. So that is how most intercom systems and just about all the legacy intercom systems going back 40, 50, 60 years should be structured at some semblance of this or variation of what you see here. Now, with these legacy intercom systems, the two-way intercom speakers that are usually in your classrooms, they cannot be supervised. And what that means is these circuits and speakers cannot be easily adapted and put onto a UL2572 mass notification or emergency alert paging type of system like we're advocating here in this presentation. The reason is because these speakers are two-way intercom or what we call intercommunications or talkback speakers. To be able to do that, whenever these speakers are accessed, usually either if you have the older switch bank where you got a big old toggle switch there in the rack or on a desktop console, when you flip that switch up to the intercom mode for whatever room or classroom you're calling, you're actually connecting that speaker to what we call an intercom or a push-pull amplifier. Another term you'll hear a lot is talkback amplifier. This is a smaller amplifier within the intercom system. They all use some semblance of the same thing. It's usually 10 or 12 watts. Some are as low as 6 or 8, and I've seen some systems that their intercom amp is as high as 15 watts. But it's generally large enough to handle the biggest classroom or science lab that you would ever want to do intercommunications to. And typically, I think the largest I ever seen in my 30-plus years of experience would be 4 speakers in a single room, and that would be a really big science lab. But most of them have 2 or 1 speaker in the room. And it's easy to talk to. You know who you're talking to, and you don't get a lot of background noise. So because these speakers have to utilize the internal talkback amplifier, push-pull amplifier, we are unable to supervise these two-way circuits. Nobody can. So what does that leave us to do? If we can't do that, then why are we even having this presentation? Well, to add UL-listed emergency alert, paging, messaging systems to your existing system, we utilize the common area, those one-way only paging speakers that are already connected to your system and you've already got them spread throughout the facility. Now, to describe this a little bit, whenever we do mass notification or emergency page messaging or alert systems in the public sector or the private sector out there, like manufacturing, industry, office high-rises, and those type of facilities, or even government facilities or military bases, there aren't speakers in every single office or area. The speakers are always located out in the common areas, just like they are in your educational facility. They're only in the corridors, they're in the break rooms, they're in the copy rooms, they're in the lobbies. Because even if you're in your office or one of the other conference rooms or whatever, you're going to hear the alert and the messages coming through the common area speakers just outside your door or window. It is exactly the same inside any educational facility. It is exactly the same in any educational facility. You do not need to use the speakers within the classroom and the instructional space for the emergency alert. Now, you can always have the audio for the alert going through the intercom system and going out to all the classroom speakers, but they will not be supervised. They won't be listed as such. But all of the common area speakers, the exterior speakers, the bus line zone, all of those other one-way speakers will get the system. But all of the other common area speakers will be supervised and they will be listed for this use, and they will be getting all the messages, the emergency alerts, all your shelter in places, your lockdowns, your active shooters, your emergency evacs, your severe weather, all your emergency announcements. They will be throughout all the common areas at a louder volume, and everybody within the school, no matter where they are, should be able to hear the announcement. One thing to keep in mind is there may be from one facility to the next, there may be certain areas like, say, a metal shop or a body shop, or just regular shops or labs where they may be far away from the common area speakers or whatever, where you may just have to add a speaker or a horn or two tapped off the local common area. Just be aware that that may be the case, but that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and you would know or would have to identify those areas, and it's easy to put a speaker wired to the nearest common area speaker just to cover certain dead areas that you may have. Now, all of these common area speakers in most of these legacy systems are fed from either a single all-call amplifier, and some systems actually have a smaller zone page amplifier and then a larger all-page amplifier on there. And then some of them, depending on the dealer, the installer, or the manufacturer's recommendations, may have multiple all-call amplifiers, or not all-call, but common area amplifiers that they access. There's no one single way to do it. There's a bunch of different ways, but in almost all the cases, there's going to be one external all-page amplifier that's used to handle all the speakers in the whole school whenever you do an all-page or the bells go off everywhere. And this is what we're really concerned with. This is where we're going to put our equipment and make this all work. Our solution is a device that we manufacture. It's called an ID8. This system's been around for many, many, many years, and it's used in a lot of high-profile military, U.S. government, industrial, Department of Energy projects, a lot of VA hospital projects throughout the world, as a matter of fact. I mean, we're a global company, so these are used on rail systems, transportation systems, and big government systems and high-rises all over the world. But it's got a very unique application for the U.S. school educational market for adding emergency stuff that's listed to your existing system. A lot of intercom manufacturers out there right now are advocating replacing all the intercom systems and then putting in some of the IP stuff and replace that and then linking them together to give you some of the mass note. But just about all these are not listed for that use, and they run into problems with the local fire marshals or authorities that have a jurisdiction or AHJ on there. But we have a way to do this without replacing your existing system and without rewiring all the speaker circuits and replacing all your speakers in your system and getting the full UL listing, excuse me, and having the full UL mass notification life safety listing that your local AHJ is going to require. So we put this device in the rack or in a separate rack or in a data room, electrical room, wherever, near the head end, and we put it between the common area one-way page amplifier or amplifiers and the central equipment or your intercom system. What we do is we receive the audio signal from the intercom system or paging system into our system, and then we route that audio to whatever zone or groups of zones that it needs to be routed to, whether you got one or multiple. All of the output zones that go out to your common areas and the external amplifiers and the wiring, we will supervise all of those. And we can use your existing amplifiers, and we will supervise every single one of the circuits and the amps going out with that, just by putting this in between the intercom and the alcohol amplifiers. Now, I said we can reuse your existing speakers. There are several ways to do this. The easiest way is we get to use the existing 25-volt power amplifiers that are already there. You're going to have at least one. There may be multiples. That is fine. However many you have, however many common area circuits you have, we just make sure we have the ID8 to handle it, and we should be good to go. No rewiring of the speakers. We don't need to retap anything on the speakers. All we just put the ID8 in, wire it to the amplifier, and away we go, and we're all done with that. Another problem with this is if you want to split these zones up or you want to add more 25-volt amplifiers, a negative to this approach is 25-volt amplifiers are very unique. They are manufactured by just a few of the intercom makers out there, and they're very limited in sizes, they're very limited in styles, and they tend to be a lot more expensive than a common off-the-shelf 70-volt paging amplifier, which there are dozens and dozens and dozens, and many make, models, sizes, shapes, channels available out there on the market. So that's one negative. So if we're going to stay with the 25-volt, chances are you'll be buying a Rollin or a Bogan or a Telcor or whatever 25-volt amp to match your system, even though it doesn't have to match your system, and they will be limited and they'll be more expensive because they're only used almost exclusively in intercom systems for schools. That's just an information. Another option to keep the same 25-volt speakers is you can use a 35-volt amplifier. Penton Audio has several sizes of dual-channel 35-volt amplifiers, and they work just fine on a 25-volt speaker circuit. No problem whatsoever. The only physical issue is that whatever the wattages are on your 25-volt system, it's going to look like twice that to a 35-volt amplifier. So if you have 10 25-volt speakers, they're all tapped at 1 watt on a circuit, then that's going to be 10 watts to a 25-volt. Well, that actually looks like a 20-watt load to a 35-volt amplifier. Still works fine, does everything, just got to make sure you size the amplifier to whatever the speaker load will be or all the speakers on that circuit, and you don't have to do any retapping or wiring of the speakers. The other option is if you're going to totally rework the zones for all your common area speakers. Let's just say, for example, you have a switch bank system and they have a dozen or more common area circuits coming back and they're on switch banks and there's only 8 or 10 speakers on each one to keep it under the intercom amplifier talkback amp load. Then you want to combine them, but they say, yeah, I'm going to combine them, but I want to have, you know, this building on its own, that wing on its own, or that floor on its own, or maybe that grade, all their corridor speakers are going to be on its own. Well, then you might need 4, 5, or 6, or 8 amplifiers to handle all those loads. Well, you may elect to go with 70 volt, and that's fine. You do not have to rewire your speakers, but you do have to retap your speakers because your speakers are going to be tapped at 25 volts. And so what do I mean by retap? Well, any 25-volt speaker that you're going to have, regardless of the manufacturer, is almost certainly going to be a dual voltage tap transformer. What that means is there's going to be a bunch of leads from your transformer that's on the speaker, like you see here in this image, and it's going to have some colors on some leads are going to be a certain wattage tap at 25 volts, and then they're going to be a certain wattage tap at 70 volts. And then some are only 25 and some are only 70. And they're usually printed right there on the transformer, so you don't have to guess at it. So if you're going to go with 70 volt transform or power, if you're going to go with 70 volt amplifiers, then somebody's going to have to go to all the common area speakers connected to them and move that wire, that one wire, the positive wire, from the 25 volt tap to the applicable 70 volt tap. Now, a lot of times you can use this as an opportunity to actually increase the tap. So if they're at a half a watt or 1 watt at 25 volt, they may want to move it and let's put it at 2 watts or 4 watts at 70 volts because I could get big amplifiers and make them even louder. So that just gives you an option. But that's just one labor issue that you should be aware of if you're going with 70-volt amplifiers to split your zones up and make it more flexible for you. So what is this ID8C that I'm talking about? Well, this is Penton Audio's very popular and globally popular, by the way, UL listed emergency alert paging and messaging control system. It can go up to 16,000 plus zones on a fully distributed big system like a military project or a U.S. government project like U.S. Capitol Hill Complex, where the system is used. It's fully UL2572 listed for mass note and audio voice evac applications. It's also EN5416, which is the equivalent of our UL2572 over in the European nations, as well as the Middle East and over in the Far East. They all recognize EN5416 as our life safety listing and certification for equipment that handles this. And like we said, the requirements of UL2572 are, these are some of the key features that the ID8 system does. It has 8 supervised zones on each unit, supervise the wiring circuits and all the amplifiers. Each one of these units will handle up to 2 external backup amplifiers, and those are fully supervised as well. And this will work with any existing external 25 volt, 70 volt, or 100 volt amplifiers. 100 volts used everywhere in the world except for North America. Use your existing 25 or 70 volt installed speakers that we talked about when you would have to mess with the taps on the speakers or not. The system has 99 levels of priority that you can assign to any audio input or any audio signal within the system. There are 4 hours of internal audio message storage on the system. There are 9 logic control inputs for external triggering of different things on each of these units, and also there are 8 programmable relay outputs on these units, and a whole lot more. So how does this work? How can we take this box that you see here and stick it in the middle of your intercom system and amplifiers and make it a UL listed system? Well, it's quite ingenious on how this works. You have any external 25 or 70 volt amplifier. We take a line level output from this unit, go into the amplifier. The amplified output up to 1,000 watts max, whether it's 25 or 70 volts, comes back into the system for that zone, and then the speaker wiring terminates on that own zone. And then it doesn't matter how many speakers are on there as long as it doesn't exceed 1,000 watts or the wattage of the amplifier powering it, obviously. And we do this supervision via what we call impedance referencing. So we monitor the impedance on the speaker circuit to a baseline that's set. There are no end-of-line devices required, which means you do not have to go above the ceiling and rewire any of the circuits or combine the circuits in any way and then have to wire a separate device all the way back. We just put all the speakers you want on that zone or circuit, and we take a baseline, and then that's what we're referencing. And if it gets outside the fault tolerance, which you set in the programming, it will give you a fault indication. And it supervises for opens, shorts, and grounds, or what we call leakage in the audio realm, for those audio circuits. The amplifiers, both primary and backup, are monitored under load and with no load, and they're monitored to make sure they're passing audio and also to make sure that there are no shorts, opens, or leakage when the circuitry between the amplifier and the return amplified leg. So fully supervised. And also, if you add backup amplifiers, you could put up to 2 backup amplifiers on every one of the ID8 systems. And these are fully supervised. The system will automatically switch over to the backup amp any circuit that has a primary amp failure. It'll enunciate the fault issue, and then when you fix the primary amp or somebody turns it back on because they actually turned it off, then it will automatically switch it back over and self-heal itself. You can put up to 2 on any one of these units, which means you can have 1 backup amp backing up all 8 circuits, or you can have 1 backup amp backing up 4 and another backup doing the other 4, or you don't have to use any backup amps. It's totally up to you and your authority having jurisdiction. Chances are, if you're using this for a listed mass notification alert system, then they're going to have you put at least 1 backup amplifier per, one of these units that you have in your system, because if the primary goes down, you have no way to alert. They're definitely going to make you have a backup. Just word to the wise there. And for backup amplifiers, you make sure they're sized to handle the largest zone that they would ever be called on to back up. So you can have 60, 30s, 100-watt amplifiers, but if you got that one zone that's 250 watts, then that backup amp better make sure it's 250 watts or greater. Just FYI. All right, there's a couple of ways that we can actually do this and interface it into the intercom system. It will always be between the intercom system and the one-way page zone or common area amplifiers. It will always be there. But there's a couple of ways that this can be done. Maybe in a smaller school or a more simplified school, all your common areas are one zone. They always get the bells. They always get the announcements. You know, there's no zone paging going out to these. Whenever you do an all page or bells, whatever go off, it goes out to every common area speaker out there. Well, then that's easy. Just make sure all your common areas are combined on one circuit. I mean, they can be combined at the head end. You don't have to go out in the field and rewire anything. Make sure your amplifier is handled big enough to handle all, which it should be if it's an all-call amplifier already on your intercom system. And we get one signal from the intercom system into our ID8. We route it out to the amplifier, and we supervise the amp and all the speaker circuits. As long as you're under 1,000 watts, which I can guarantee pretty much every school would be, you'll be fine, no problems. Quick, easy, simple. The other thing is most intercom all-page amps are going to be rated at 250 watts or less, so we can handle 1,000 watts per circuit. So there should be no problem with power and loading up on the circuits at all going this route. The second route, which will probably be most common, the second method, which will probably be most common, is having multiple common area zones out there, which means there would be multiple common area amplifiers sized to handle the wattage load of each one of the circuits or zones. So to do this, we would have one audio signal from the intercom for every zone or per zone. So if you've got 8 common area zones that you have zoned out because you want to be able to page these through the intercom system separately and or route bells to individually. Maybe there's a Votech center that's one section of the school and their bell schedule is different than, you know, the rest of the school. Well, that has to be a separate zone to be able to do that. So if you're at 2 to 8 or 2 or more zones, we're going to need an output or an input from the intercom system into our ID8 up to a max of 8 per unit. We can put multiple units. I'll go into that in a minute. Into the ID8. And then the output is you'll have to have the common areas combined into the zoning, which they may be already if you've already got defined zones, and they're going to have their own amplifier per every zone. Now, they're going to be smaller amps, easy to do, and all this is done at the head end, not out in the field. So this way, you can page a zone individually or groups of zones through your intercom system. It goes right to the ID8 and routes out to the zones that you want. So either one big zone with one bigger amplifier and all the common areas are out there, or you can zone these out as you need. You just have to have an input from the intercom system into the ID8 for every single zone, and then the ID8 has the outputs, and it still supervises everything, all the circuits, speakers, and amplifiers. Now, I mentioned earlier that some newer intercoms, maybe in the last 10 to 15 years, are in what we call a distributed mode, which means is you might have a centralized head end or you might have some kind of head end equipment, but then you also have node equipment that's spaced out in the facility. Well, we handle that with the ID8 as well, but we have what we call ID8S expansion units. Each one of these will handle 8 zones by themselves. You can put up to 31 of these on a single ID8C controller for a full-blown system that will handle 256 zones of supervision. And each ID8S does 8 zones just like the ID8C controller. To connect these, there are several different ways, but you can go just standard Cat5e or Cat6 copper from any ID8C to an ID8S and in between all the S's, but your limitation is 100 meters or 330 feet standard data length. The most common is doing it via fiber. We can run 2-strand fiber between any 2 boxes, and then we like to do a closed loop back because we can, any break or short in that local network, this is not on your network, it's its own network, they have their own fiber cards, direct connection, will be isolated. the fault will be enunciated and logged, and it will self-heal itself once that connection is back to integrity or back online. It's 2-strand fiber, and we can use multi-mode and we can use single mode. Multi-mode is about 6,000 feet between any two boxes, and single mode will go up to about 10 kilometers between any two boxes. And you can use fiber passive patch panels if you have a star pattern, depending on how your fiber backbone is laid out. So we can do distributed mode. Just remember, you're going to have an amplifier for your common area speakers in these distributed modes or out in these closets, the IDF closets or electrical closets. Chances are whatever system you're using is already going to have a booster or an external amplifier in that closet doing exactly this anyway. But you know, each school can be handled case by case and laid out in the best way that you need. Now, so we're hooked up to the intercom. We're doing the UL listing supervision of all your amplifiers and speakers, and we said we have messages and all. Well, how do we get all these messages and everything out to the speakers? Well, we do it through paging stations. We have the desktop consoles, like the PSSAS you see in the bottom here. We also have flush mount or surface mount locking wall cabinets you can put out in lobbies or certain areas, just like you have for a voice evac fire panel might have. All these are touchscreen, and you can do manually page to all the common area zones that you have on the ID8 system. You can also manually trigger all the audio stored messages on the ID8C system, and they will enunciate faults directly from the ID8 system, and you can define which one of these gets the faults or not. And when there's a fault on the system, it'll beep at the console and scroll the fault message across the bottom of the console as well, so you know there's a problem. If the ID8C is located in the admin area, and if it ever has a fault and it beeps, just like a fire alarm or security panel would, and somebody's going to hear it, then you might not need it at the stations. But if the ID8 system is in an electrical room or a data room somewhere, and nobody's there all the time, then you definitely would need the fault messages enunciated at a manned location where a paging station would be. And it has touchscreen operation, and you can put as many of these on the system as you want. There's plenty of ports on the system to handle what I think any normal school or educational facility would require. Now, how do these wire up or connect into the system? Well, if you look at this example of what a distributed system would look at, you would take the desktop consoles in your admin area, one or two or more, and they wire direct to the controller, the ID8C. If you had the distributed system with the expansion units out there, then you had a page panel that you wanted out somewhere out in the school, maybe a security office or attendance office. Well, they also can wire directly to the expansion units. They wire with standard Cat5e or Cat6 data cable, 1,000-meter difference or max distance on that. They're fully powered and supervised by the ID8 system. That's how they meet their listing. You can put up to 4 on an ID8C controller, and you can put up to 2 on an ID8S expansion unit. And like I said before, you can define which one of these gets default messages or don't. The ID8C can store 4 hours of audio messages. That is a ton of messages. Even in the biggest government and military facilities, I get nowhere near that amount of message storage. Doesn't matter how many messages, it's just the total record time of all the messages stored into the system. So we can trigger these messages a variety of ways. Now, one way is it can be scheduled. You can have scheduled messages or tones just like a bell schedule. I mean, the IDA can handle your bell schedules if you want, but chances are that's already done through your intercom system, and we're just passing that audio through. No big deal. That way you don't have to learn how to program all that. But let's just say when the fire alarm system goes off, you want to trigger certain evac messages. Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is the fire alarm could just give us a relay. So when it goes off and has an alarm, it gives us a relay. That relay goes to a logic input on the ID8, and it's programmed to say, oh, I'm supposed to play this fire alarm evac message, so I'm going to play it out to all my common area speakers. And it will play until the relay is reset or silenced on the fire alarm control panel. Another way we could do that is if the fire alarm system already has a message generator, which means it already has voice evac built into the fire alarm system, well then we can actually take that audio from the fire alarm system into the ID8, and then we can prioritize it and reroute it to all the common area speakers. So let's say you got a fire alarm system with voice evac, and you've got voice evac speakers in just certain areas. Maybe it's in what we call areas of assembly, which by NFPA 101 Life Safety Code said certain areas of assembly, or if it's characterized as that, like a cafeteria, an auditorium, and a gymnasium, you may have voice evac panels already in there, and or they just may have voice evac speakers connected to the main fire alarm panel. Well, if that's the case, we can get that audio and send it through all the common area speakers in the school on our UL2572 listed mass notification system. So we just take the audio, and sometimes that audio from the fire alarm is accompanied by a relay closure to tell us to send the audio through. Both of these connections, no matter which way you do it with the fire alarm or the ID8, can be supervised either from the fire alarm system or it can be supervised by the ID8 system. So if there's a break or a problem between, you'll get some supervisory or fault enunciations, and or both. So there's a bunch of different ways. So no matter how stringent your local authority having jurisdiction may be, we have a way that we can supervise it that should make the fire marshal or your safety officer happy. Other ways that we could trigger and store messages are just manually via push buttons or any kind of trigger, because remember, as I said earlier, every one of these ID8 units, the controllers and the ID8S expansion units, have 9 logic inputs or control inputs. So we can have push buttons. They can be locking buttons, or they can be momentary push buttons. They can be all kinds of triggers. Maybe a severe weather station has a contact closure, or maybe you got door sensors or panic buttons or motion sensors. Any logic input that can give a contact closure or pulse, we can play a message or tell it to do all kinds of things inside the unit, even trigger an output relay if you want. Another way to trigger messages is from the desktop consoles themselves. So you can have buttons on there for whatever messages you want to give that user or operator the ability to send out into the school, such as lockdowns, shelter in places, severe weathers, or whatever. They can manually trigger those from the desktop control consoles if you want. You just put buttons on there that you want them to do, and the stuff you don't want them to do, don't give them a button. It's that easy. There's an optional GUI software that you do not need to make any of this work. This is just an optional control platform that you can use to give you some advanced features on the system if you like. Just like the desktop consoles, you can use them to page, trigger messages. You can actually flash record custom messages with the Terra Manager GUI software. And you can also do some controls, like you could turn zones up or down, monitor, control input and outputs, all of that on the screen. It is a software suite, so we do not sell the PC hardware, and it can be installed on any Windows operating system, on any Windows PC. It's very easy to set up and do designs. You do not have to be a graphic artist. You do not need to go and get certified or advanced trained on this system. It is extremely easy to set up, very user intuitive, and you can have everything as simple as a custom screen with a bunch of buttons on it with your county or school district, emblem or logo on there, or you can have tons of different screens with Google Earth images like you see here, or just maps, and the actual buttons or images within the maps can be buttons. The images actually themselves, I want to do a page to a section, I can hit it, or a page to a building, I hit that building, and that building changes color, and I can send messages, do pages, or what have you. So keep this in mind if you have bigger schools or whatever. This is an add-on to what you would do with your desktop consoles. Now, you could take this whole concept a step further, because once we put these ID8 units into all your old legacy school intercoms, remember, it'll go into any of them. So if you got a bunch of Rollin Board telecenters and you got a bunch of Bogan multicoms out there, and then you got a few telcors out there, maybe a handful of Valcoms scattered throughout your district, you could do this on all the systems. It doesn't care. It's just raw audio and amps and speakers that we're in the middle of. But all these ID8 units now become your gateway into that school, and they can reside because they have an Ethernet port on your network, on your LAN and WAN. And then that gives us the ability to easily do district-wide paging and messaging. And how do we do that? Well, let's say you already have a VoIP system for your district, and a lot of districts do. I'd say the vast majority of districts have voice systems, and they have a SIP server. Whether it's Cisco, ShoreTel, Avaya, there's a SIP server. Well, all the ID8C units are SIP ready. Every single one of these units at every single one of your schools can register as a SIP endpoint on your existing Cisco, ShoreTel, Avaya, what have you, SIP server, and your SIP programmer or VoIP programmer there can actually assign an extension for every single school, and now from the VoIP phones, you can dial that school and do an emergency page or a regular page through all the common areas on that school. If you have multiple common areas for the school, you can actually dial into the system and do zone pages if you want from your VoIP anywhere in the district that your programmer allows it. You don't have to add anything. This is ready to go the minute you put your first ID8C in your legacy system. This capability is there at your fingertips. Now, VoIP systems are like phone systems, so what if I want to call multiple schools at one time, or maybe all of the schools in a district, or maybe your county is split up into multiple districts and you want to page all the schools in District 1 and maybe all the schools in District 2. Well, for the VoIP system to do that, you'd have to be able to page multiple SIP extensions or VoIP extensions. It's like paging multiple phones. Some can do it, some can't. It's usually very expensive systems that allow you this, what we call SIP trunking. But we give you a very easy way to do it, and very inexpensive. Just add our Terra FXO module. You see right there. It's about the size of 2 decks of cards side by side, playing cards side by side. It's a PoE device. It too can register on your SIP server, and it will allow you to program custom DTMF codes to access multiple SIP points. So let's just say I got the FXO at extension 3000. I pick up one of your VoIP phones. I call 3000. It beeps, and then I enter the DTMF code that is one school, or maybe it's a group of schools, or maybe it's the entire district, all the ID8Cs that you got in your system. So that's what the FXO gets you. Very inexpensive, very quick. You just stick it on the network and you're done. You don't need to do anything at the schools past that point. And another option, we have an IP version of those touchscreen desktop microphones, even the lock cabinet ones. And this allows you to program all the ID8Cs out there in your system. You could put a button on this, and you could sit there and dynamically go, I want to call school A, school B, school F, school G, bam, and do a page. And now through the network, you're paging those schools from the IT5 IP-based microphone into those ID8Cs. Or you can have group buttons. You can say all my elementaries, or all District 1, all of District 8, or whatever, or even a button that says district-wide. And the IT5 also has 80 megabytes of internal audio storage, which means is you can store any messages you want or audio locally on that microphone and actually send it out to one or more or groups of schools through the ID8 in your network. It's that easy. And so you can just add that IT5 and bam, immediately you got district-wide paging and messaging without doing a lot. And you want to take that a step further, you can use the Terra Manager GUI that we discussed a little earlier, and that will also, not only will it give you the ability to page and send messages like the IT5, but you can also flash record custom messages and send them district-wide. You can stream audio district-wide if you wanted. So like you had an audio file, or maybe the superintendent had a welcoming message, where you could put that message on your PC with the manager, and you could stream that out to all the schools from the Terra Manager GUI. Also, any faults anywhere on any of the ID8 systems will be reported across the network back to the Terra Manager GUI, and they would show up. So if you had a district map with all your schools there, and you had icons for the schools or pictures or the GUI, the Google Earth, they would flash whatever color you said I wanted to flash for a fault, and then it's got a button on the screen that you click or hit if you're using touchscreen, and it will actually show you exactly or display exactly what that fault message is on that ID8C unit way over at the school at the other end of the district. It's good to have this for the maintenance people, that they can have this on a PC in their maintenance office, and they don't even need to send messages or pages. They just need to do it to monitor the system to see if there's a fault on any schools anywhere out there in the district. Quick, easy, doesn't take, crazy programming, or it doesn't take crazy licensing. There's no servers involved with this whatsoever. Very easy to set up. So I just gave you a 30,000-foot highlight of how we can take your investment that you've already spent on your legacy intercom systems and add the all-important UL2572 mass notification and emergency paging alert messaging system to your existing equipment for very little money, very little impact, and you don't need specialized dealers to do this if you're doing it in-house. If you are a dealer, you do not need to be a certified dealer in every single one of the intercom systems or whatever. You can go in and put this on anybody's system and you're ready to go. So I just highlighted, there's a ton of other features and there's a ton of different ways to do this if you do not need emergency mass notification listings. We've got other ways we could do this district-wide and locally to give you a lot of these same features without the security end of it as well. So please, if you have any questions or you want more information, please shoot me an email, jeff.robertson@penton-usa.com. And don't forget to visit our website for more data sheets, catalogs, brochures at www.penton-usa.com. Thank you very, very much, and I hope you have a terrific day.